So today we are going to take a person and we're going to, or two people, and we're going to put them in a setting that is not the right size or realistic size. So here I have my brother and my husband, and unbeknownst to them, they are going to move from this gallery to this dish with the apple in it. Now, the number one thing that you want to make sure before you start working with your two images is you want to make sure your images have the same DPI. Otherwise, you get all sorts of craziness happening. So to do that, you're going to go to image size. You're going to click on image size. Here it says resolution. So my resolution is 300 pixels per inch. So I can say okay. Now let me check this one. Image size. Go down to here. Okay, so they're both 300 pixels per inch. So that is good for me. So I'm going to say okay. Now, I want to do some testing before I end up doing my final cut. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that selection tool that we had previously learned about, and I'm going to just grab these two. And remember, I'm going to go to my arrow, my move tool. I'm going to bring them over to my apple image because I want it to look like my husband is leaning on the apple. And what I can do is I can change the opacity again. And yeah, that looks like he's going to be leaning on the edge of the apple, and it's going to make them look like mini people. So I can bring my opacity back up. You can crop this in the original image, or you can end up cropping it in this image. I think it might be helpful to crop in this image so that you don't have to worry about changing your selection. So because I'm going to be working in this area and I want to be able to see, and I don't necessarily need all of this other information around them, I'm going to go to my magnifying glass and I'm going to click on the plus and I'm going to zoom in on them and I'm going to kind of try and center them in here. And I want to make sure, that I can see all of them. That's going to make it very helpful. If you're missing a little part of them, it gets tricky. Okay, so now I'm going to go over here to this tool, and usually what it looks like is this like little lasso, and this is a relatively smart tool, and it is going to pick up on the pixels that are around these two people, and it's going to start to highlight them. But to make it even better, we are going to go to the magnetic lasso. So you can see it has like that little magnet looking thing to it. And I recommend that you do this with a mouse. And oops, so it's starting to like pick up all of this information. So I need to make more clicks. So I'm going to click on this. Woo! I'm going to double click and then I'm going to hit select, deselect because that did not do what I wanted it to do. So I might come over here and it's going to start to follow the edge of his body. And every so often, I am going to click down so that my magnetic lasso doesn't start to grab something else. So I'm going to go around his head. And this is an easy area. So because he's wearing dark clothes, and it's a light background, that is going to work really easily. So when you're taking the photos of your people, you might want to say, okay, if I'm putting them on a dark background, I want to make sure that when I take their photo, it's on a light background and vice versa. So I'm going to go all the way down and around. And I'm sorry, this does take a little bit of time. So you're kind of watching me click. But what's good for you to see is that this does take some time. It shouldn't be something that you do in 30 seconds because you're going to have a weird sort of jaggedy edge. Go around the shoe. I lost a little bit of the bottom of the shoe there, but I'm not too worried. If it was my project that I was submitting to me, I would go back and fix that. I'm going to go up this leg a little faster because I've got all this white. Now in here, I want to make sure that I'm clicking because I have that darker area. Go down his shoulders. And sometimes it works out. Like this is working out nicely. I'm just going to have to be careful when I get to the top. And if you get more than what you wanted, you can always erase it out later. It's getting less that is the problem. So if we end up with a little bit more, that's okay. Around we go. We're almost there. And it depends on what your person is doing too. I gotta go around his hair, so I have to focus. But if your person is doing something that is harder to follow, that might be more difficult. Okay, so once I get back to the beginning and I click on my first dot, you can start to see that I have like these marching ants, and they are going all the way around my figure. So, whew, that's good. I've got that part. So now what I need to do is I need to say select, and then I need to select the inverse, because what I am going to do is I'm going to grab my eraser tool and I'm going to erase everything around them. But if I don't select the inverse, what would happen is I would start to erase them because they were what I selected. So let me make sure I get rid of my edges here. All right. Okay, so once I think that looks good, and remember your eraser's over here, it kind of looks like your standard pink eraser. Up here, you can see that that was at 300, so it was a medium size. If you wanted to change that, you could make it really big, but I felt like 300 was good enough. Okay, so we still have the marching ants around them. So what I'm going to go to is deselect. Now, it looks pretty good. You can see if I grab my magnifying glass and I change it to the plus sign that I might have lost some information on his feet, which I'm not crazy about. But what's really looking weird is my brother's hair up here. So now we are going to go to the eraser tool, and you want to make sure, remember we talked about layers before, that you're not on your background layer, because you don't want to erase your background layer. You want to erase the layer that is around your people. You can see, oops, I might have dug out their shoulders a little bit. You guys are obviously going to take more time with this because it's your project and not a tutorial. So now I have my eraser, and that seems like it would be big because it would take out chunks of his head. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to make it smaller. And then I can start to erase out those weird chunks that were on his head. I can also give my eraser a blurred edge so that it's not going to be as crisp. And that I might do, you can see that it's kind of like fuzzy around his hair. I dove in a little too far there, so I'm going to say undo eraser. And then I'm going to come back, and using that softer edge, I'm going to get rid of that over there. And where his fuzzy beard is, yeah, I'm going to use that softer edge and get rid of that blue behind him. And it just fades it out. So like if I were to erase here, you can see it kind of is like, I don't know, a sunburst type thing, but I need to erase those. So step back, and step back, because we don't want him to have those holes. So the more time you take in selecting your people and in erasing out these areas, the better your image is going to look. So I'm just kind of cleaning this up a little bit. All right. Now, it looks like his foot is a little high. That doesn't make sense. His foot is like floating on the apple. So I'm going to go to my move tool. I'm going to make sure I turned off my eraser. And I'm going to go to my layer. And I'm going to just nudge them down. So now their feet would be on the bowl. And let's zoom out, and hopefully it'll still look like they are resting on the apple. All right, and so there we go. We have this play of space, and maybe it might be better just visually to move these guys over so that we can see more of the apple. So I'm just sliding them over. All right, so now it looks like my husband's leaning on the apple and my brother's coming over here patting him on the back and saying like, it's okay, man. You've got this whole apple to eat. So I want you guys to think of a creative way to start to play with space. And I hope that helps.